Chapter 4. 48 hours had passed since Tara and Luke were arrested by the South Korean police, but in a windowless, dingy, grey holding cell with a foul smell permeating the air, it seemed like weeks had passed for Tara. Claustrophobia was already wreaking havoc in her nerves, as she listened in horror to the low murmurs coming from outside the cell she was in. Only two things dominated her thoughts at the moment: fear of being left to rot in that cell, and fear of what lay outside the door. Tara stood absolutely still, her eyes wide in the gloom, as she heard her second fear was about to come to pass. The sound of the heavy steel door began to open. The guard's eyes were cold and dark, just like the rest of his appearance. His hair was plastered to his scalp, which only emphasized his pale, unshaven face. Without a word spoken, he signaled for her to exit the cell, then grabbed her by the arm and forcefully escorted her down a brightly lit narrow walkway. Until now, Tara was sure that their jailers were South Korean, but fear and confusion had now left her petrified at the thought. They may well be in the hands of the North Koreans. Moments later they came to a large door and stopped. The guard unlocked the door to a large room and escorted her to a set of chairs in the middle of the room. He roughly lowered her into the chair and exited the room. The room was strangely still, leaving her terrified at the thought of what was still to come. A single bare bulb in the middle of the room swayed softly and most disorientingly. Shadows of light splashed up against the wall, instilling a sense of dread. Feeling horribly vulnerable, Tara's imagination quickly slipped into overdrive. She trembled from what sounded like distant, incoherent voices in distress. Shadows turned to darkness, and pareidolia soon began to seep into the greyness of the walls as dim, heinous images. Then, without warning, the door opened fast and hard, crashing against the wall. Luke emerged from the doorway, looking harassed, as the same guard manhandled him into the centre of the room, and then forcibly shoved Luke into the chair, then exited the room. Tara's face lightened, and her eyes radiated with gladness at the sight of Luke. But as Luke smiled and tried to hug her, she shrugged and turned away. "I'm sorry for not telling you. I can explain everything, I really can, I swear," Luke said. Just then the door opened. An intelligent, uniformed, hawk-faced man of 50 or so, carrying a holstered gun at his side, sat at a desk several feet away from them. He stared quietly at Tara and Luke, tapping the table with his skeletal fingers as he smoked a small, thin cigar. The lighting in the room silhouetted his thin, gaunt grin, his lips moving slowly between amused and ire. He seemed to enjoy the anxiety and dismay he infused in them. It was as though he knew some deep, dark secret of theirs and was revelling in the thought of it. With a hard stare, Luke shouted, "Why are we here? Charge us or let us go, damn it!" With a stern look, the interrogator took off his hat, revealing an oblong, shaven head, then took a drag of his cigar and blew a dense cloud of smoke their way, causing Tara to cough. He grinned as though taking great pleasure in watching her gasp for fresh air. "What did we do?" Tara screamed. "That is what I'm about to find out," the interrogator said. "There were 2 deaths in the general area where you 2 were apprehended. Mr. Hapkido was found dead in his vehicle, and a North Korean soldier was reportedly killed, also in the vicinity where you were. 1 death could be attributed to coincidence by some, but 2 deaths are no coincidence. So, I offer you 2 options. But before I do, consider what I'm about to say next very carefully. Your lives could depend on it. You have an attorney waiting to represent you. But understand this, he has no authority here. He cannot help you now or ever. So will you spend the rest of your lives in the cells you just came from, or will you be released to North Korea? The land where there is no such thing as fair, only despair and death. But if you answer my questions truthfully, swiftly, and now, and I believe you, I have the power to release you." Tara and Luke looked at each other, and they agreed to his terms. Luke cleared his throat and said, "What exactly do you want to know? But just so we're clear, I was injured in the crash and can't remember anything until shortly before I reached the street." With a murderous stare, the interrogator shouted, "I want to know everything!" "I remember only bits and pieces, mostly of Tara trying to help me." There was a long pause. The air was thick with tension. Luke tried to continue. "Silence!" Defiantly, Luke shouted, "I told you I cannot remember!" The interrogator calculatingly ignored Luke and pressed a button on his desk. A moment later, 2 guards entered and escorted Luke out of the room. He then shot Tara a hard stare and said, "There will not be any hard questioning. Only one last chance for freedom. Answer carefully." Without hesitation, Tara told him who and why she came to South Korea to see. Through cigar smoke and a flicker of light from the swaying bare bulb above, he stared, his face thinly smiling in the terrifying gloom. "I know all of this. I know all about you. Tell me what I don't know, and tell me now." "Everything Luke told you was true. All I can tell you is what I saw while I was searching for Luke after the car crash. While I was looking around, I saw what looked like a huge crop circle. I walked over it to get a better look. I took some pictures of it with my cell phone because it looked so strange. It had a wide, circular opening in the middle of it. I looked down into it with the flash from my phone, but it was so deep I couldn't see the bottom. While I was doing that, a helicopter began hovering above the area. Soon after shots were fired at me, I ran for my life. Moments later, I found Luke near a tree. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't even know who he was. We hid under a fallen tree for a while. I didn't know what else to do. I was disorientated and didn't know where the street was. When I saw the beams of light shining down from atop the hill, I crawled out from under the tree to check it out. That's when I saw the soldier." There was a silent pause, as though Tara was reflecting back, trying to find the right words to say without sounding crazy, or worse, lying. With the look of fury, the thin, hawk-faced inquisitor shouted, "Continue!" "What I saw next was something right out of a nightmare. A reptilian, armoured alien being of some kind swooped down on the soldier. That's all I saw. After that, I just ran like hell. I was so scared I even forgot about Luke. That's why we weren't together when they found us." Tara tried to continue, when a guard walked in and said something softly to the investigator. The investigator nodded and sat down, and then started to look through a file on his desk. A minute later, a lawyer, dressed in a dark blue suit, walked in, followed by her friend, Detective John Logan. He said to the investigator, "You have no right to hold my client. She's coming with us," then told Tara to follow them. Luke stared out of the window of the passenger cabin of the Boeing 747 jumbo jet, while Tara looked away as the plane took off. She could never get used to flying. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please stow your carry-on luggage underneath the seat in front of you or in an overhead bin. Please take your seat and fasten your seatbelt, and also make sure your seat back and folding trays are in their full upright position." As the flight attendant continued the announcement, Luke said, "Sure glad your parents sent that lawyer, eh? I was really surprised to see John there, out here too." Tara said nothing. She only nodded. "Why are you so grumpy? I said I was sorry 1,000,000,000,000 times. Why don't you let me explain?" "Now you want to explain? How many years have you been a monster? Who else knows about this?" "Come on, give me a break. I love you. You know that. I saved your life back there, didn't I? I could be mad at you too." "For what?" "For being so grumpy." "I'm sorry. I should have told you about it. I was only trying to protect you. I figured if you didn't know anything about it, I could keep you out of harm's way." "When were you going to tell me? When we started having kids?" "I bet they'll all be cute little monsters," Luke said with a grin. Tara just lowered her head and sighed. "Just kidding. Dr. Bond said we should be all right in that department." "Dr. Bond? How many other people know about this?" Luke's eyes looked away as he nervously answered her. "Everybody. Well, not everyone. Your parents and mine don't know about it. Most of the people I know don't know about it. I'd say just a few friends. And my sisters." "Now, let me get this straight. Everyone knew about this but me. And you did it for my protection. How come you weren't interested in their protection?